Hello there, and let's keep going. Today we're looking at typography for our imaginary book cover. We have designed the title so far, but there's a bit more that goes on a book cover's front panel than that. So we're going to start adding that in now. Our imaginary author's name is James K. Carver. Now we're going to pretend that James K. Carver is not Tom Clancy or John Grisham. He doesn't need to emphasize his name more than the title of his book. His name is not going to sell the book just yet. So that means we can do some really nice, subtle, nuanced things with the cover design instead of just burying it behind very large text. So we're going to start by duplicating can't go for the author text. So I'm going to grab not only this layer, but also the cloud texture layer. And the way to do that is hold down Shift and click both layers. Then I'm going to hold down Option and drag those two layers into our author folder. Now, that gives us a duplicate of those two layers that we can then move around and place wherever we want. So I'm going to place them here, but I don't want to make the author's name quite that large and quite that illegible in terms of its colors. So we're going to make some basic changes. I'm going to turn off the cloud texture first. We're going to change the color of Can't Go to something a little bit lighter from elsewhere in the image. That actually seems like a really good match. And it carries that sort of nice tonal balance from the sky into the text, which is really quite nice. Now, we also don't need such a heavy weight for his name. We don't want to make it too light, but I'm going to drop it from regular to medium. This is kind of the fun thing about Gotham, is each of these weights is a little different than you would expect. The regular weight I would expect to be more similar to the book weight. And this is what book looks like, which is a very slim font. Regular, on the other hand, is incredibly heavy, but I would expect bold to be the very heavy one. And instead, bold is actually a little less heavy than regular. But we're going to go with medium, which is even a little bit lighter weighted than bold. And we're going to scale that size down. So Command T will select the bounding box and let you free transform an object. I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt as I click and drag the corner. And that not only scales it appropriately, but it also makes sure that we're scaling towards the center of the object instead of towards the corner and so forth. So I actually kind of like the size that we've gotten to here. So let's type his name in. James K. Carver. That's actually bigger than I would like. So the reason that I think that's too big is right now we've got this sort of nice, almost triangular shape to the title. But if you introduce the author's name here, then we get a sort of weird, lumpy boundary to the text. That feels uncomfortable to me. So we're going to scale James Carver down a bit more until it's not larger than the first part of the title, Can't Go Home. This is actually quite readable, I think. Let's zoom out just a bit for a test. It doesn't get lost because we have some nice contrast between the name and the background. So there's very little we need to do beyond this. As long as we're happy with the way that it reads and there's not too much space between letters, you're going to be in pretty good shape with this. Let's try adding that cloud texture and see if it has a noticeable effect. If it doesn't, we'll probably get rid of it. So I'm going to scale it down a bit, move it around. Now you can see very faintly as it gets to about right here that we get a little bit of shading over the letters. It's not incredibly clear that it's meant to be a cloud texture. It almost looks like a mistake. So instead of keeping it, I'm going to delete it. And we're going to just stick with what we've got here. I am, however, going to strengthen the outer glow just a bit. We'll take this up to about 25, maybe 35%, just to help the name stand out just a little more right in this area here where it's very close tonally to the background. Now that I'm looking at them both together, the cloud texture in these letters for the title is a bit more subtle than I'd like, so I'm going to increase their visibility. And I'm going to, and you'll notice this is up here in the title box, the cloud texture that's applied to the word home specifically. And I'm going to drag it just around so we get a little bit more of that feathery texture in the letters. It's a bit more clear what we're trying to do there. All right, now that takes care of most of what we've got on the cover. The only thing we're missing, if we were to compare this to our original concept sketch, is the designation a novel. Now, we can the fun thing about designations like that is they don't have to be centered the way the rest of the text is. If we were to center a novel, and let's we're going to duplicate James Carver's name just for example. If we were to center it, we'd have to go way down here for it to be readable. And the challenge there, let me size that down to a more appropriate size. Number one, it gets a little bit lost. Number two, it starts to create a weird balance between these elements. But it's kind of competing a little bit with our central image. So instead of centering it, we're going to do something a little different, and we're going to let it live on its own in this empty space right here. And that's perfectly appropriate. There's nothing wrong with doing that. The challenge is now, of course, it's unreadable. So we're going to sample the color from Can't Go. So you can click the color window here, and you can either copy the hex color, or you can add to a swatch. I tend to just copy the hex color. I think it's a little bit easier. So Command-C, close that, go back to a novel, choose the color again, and just hit Command-V to paste. And down here, I don't think we're going to apply any of the effects that exist on the title or the author's name, because at such a small size, the effects actually make the words a little less readable, and it's much more obvious that we're applying outer glow effects. And for text at this weight and size, it's just not necessary. So we're going to turn those off altogether, and that's much cleaner, much easier to read. I do think it's a bit large still, so we're going to scale that down and see how we feel about it. And I feel pretty good about that. I'm going to float it just a little closer to the title. We could also, of course, refer to this as a murder mystery. Now you'll see the word mystery dropped way down there. That's because our line height is set so high. So we're going to drop that, and we'll break that onto a couple of lines. Now, in certain genres, you might want to spell out what kind of a book you're designing this clearly. There's no harm in it. It certainly clears things up. If you're going to do it, sometimes you might even be a little cute with it and call it a cozy, small town murder mystery, or something like that, just to give some purpose to it. I don't like the way that that's shaped, and I also am not a huge fan of doing this myself, so we're going to back up and stick with a novel. Now, there are other things that you can add to the cover. You might add a nice blurb or quotation up here from another author or from a critic who says something like, "Spectacular, this book will keep you nailed to the edge of your seat." That's entirely simple to do, and the easiest way to continue doing these things is just to duplicate the layer, move it up, scale it down. If I were going to do a blurb, and let's go ahead and do one just for kicks, I'll duplicate the author's name because we want to keep that same light tone so it's nice and readable. And I would take it down significantly in size. That's still a bit big for my taste. We'll go down to 10. And let's type something in. We'll just type in spectacular. Keeps you glued. We'll say glued instead of nailed. That's a little bit less aggressive. To the edge of your seat. Okay, and then we're going to add the attribution, the New York Times book review. All right, now again you'll see it spread way out because of the line height, so we're going to drop that down. Now, again, I think that's too big. It's competing now with the author's name, so let's drop it again. It'll be a little closer in size to a novel, and I think that's okay. That gives it an appropriate weight for where it's at. Now, it has a strange shape to it, sort of cut-in border here, so I'm going to move the entire quote onto a single line. I'm going to italicize the attribution like so. So I've just chosen the italic weight for that particular font. Now, we could stop right there, but I actually want to tighten the line height between the two. So this is where we do that. So I'm going to decrease that until I'm happy with it. And I think that actually works pretty well. So we will nudge that upward just a bit. And now look how complete this front cover feels. This is starting to feel almost like a real book. So why don't we stop here, and I'll do a third video in which we complete the spine and the back cover, and then we'll call this good. Thanks for watching.